Hello, everyone. We are so delighted to be with you today. Of course, we wish we could be there in Crete with you. My name's Alyssa Eppel, and I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Dr. Lillian Chung. And in a very short period, we are going to present to you two complementary views on how what we eat shapes our health and our mental health in critical and important ways, and how our mood and well-being in turn shapes what we eat. And so the largest framework for understanding food and health is actually the word interbeing. This is a term that describes the interconnectedness, not just between our own mind and body and between our health behaviors and what we eat, but between each other and between how we are connected to planetary health through what we eat. Another term we hope that you will adopt and live by is mindful nutrition and eating, and how this can apply to the full cycle from how we grow produce, how we make our choices of what to eat, and how we influence the health of others. So first, I'd like to start with describing to you how stress affects eating. I would also like to point out that we will point to resources at the end, and there is an important book called Savor by Dr. Lillian Chung and by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. And so what you will be learning is an integration of modern science of nutrition and health behaviors, as well as some really important ancient wisdom that helps us shape our behaviors to bring planetary and personal health. So let me just first set the framework for stress and eating. This is a topic I've studied for over 20 years to really understand how stress is shaping our health, and particularly through our food choices. Now, we know that when we're stressed, we have a lot of stress hormones and cortisol, and that drives us to choose unhealthy choices, particularly processed food, which affects our brain in a very certain way to create what I'll call like a hunger or addictive syndrome. And this in turn creates increased prediabetes or insulin resistance and intra-abdominal fat. And that puts us at risk for all of the diseases of aging. Now, we've shown this in population surveys, mostly cross-sectional surveys, as well as lab studies. But let's just take a step back and say, well, if stress has such a big effect, we should have seen its effect during the pandemic. And indeed, we did. Just the period of the pandemic created increased incidence of obesity, eating disorders, increased insulin resistance, and it changed what people ate. There are documented increases in intake of sugar, desserts, sugary beverages. And in one of our studies where we're studying employees at a hospital who have only access to healthy beverages, they did not drink as many sugary drinks or gain as much weight as people who have free access to sugary food and beverage all day. So I'm so pleased to turn this over to Dr. Lillian Chung for the latest science, which is really breathtaking numbers on understanding the link between nutrition and our physical health. Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you, Dr. Alyssa Eppel. And your work is just so important, especially making the connection in psychology and eating and mindful eating. I have been following your work for some time, and it's just breathtaking. Let me dial back a little bit and talk about how healthy lifestyle actually can prevent most of the chronic diseases that kill us, including colon cancer, stroke, cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes. The good news is that about 70% of colon cancer and stroke is preventable if we do not smoke, have a healthy weight, staying active, and also eating a healthy diet. And it's even more effective for coronary vascular disease because by following these healthy lifestyles, 80% of cardiovascular disease is preventable. And for those individuals that are really concerned about type 2 diabetes because of genetics, the good news is that about 90% of type 2 diabetes is preventable.
Yeah, this is such great news. It's so easy for us to forget how much control we really do have over our day, over the long-term incidence of these diseases.
And as the world populations live longer, we really need to find out what are the healthy lifestyle habits that can actually increase our lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, there are 5 habits: eating a healthy diet, exercising regularly, keeping a healthy body weight, not drinking too much alcohol. And this is an area that is still have to be researched rigorously, and not smoking. So for those individuals who have maintained the healthiest lifestyle, and these are from the cohort studies done in the US, they're 82% less likely to die from cardiovascular disease and 65% less to die from cancer when compared to those who have the least healthy lifestyle. And this has been followed over a course of 30 years. And there's good news. If you didn't start early in life, by the time you are middle-aged, you can still gain some benefits by following these healthy habits. And the data have shown that if you start in middle life and you are following these healthy habits, you can increase your years lived free of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And
That really is amazing news. And what do you think about for older people starting to adopt these habits? Will it still help them?
And yes, one key part, as we say, 5 aspect is healthy eating, right? So how should we be eating every day? We have a graphics, a healthy eating plate that we launched after the USDA issued their My Plate graphic. And they had, in terms of drinks, milk. And we didn't think it was scientifically valid to have adults drinking 3 glasses of milk every day. So we modified it based on science. And our healthy eating plate is quite simple. It's in 4 quadrants. Water is very important, and restricting sugar drinks, as we all know now, how detrimental it is to our health. Sugar is an inflammatory agent and also easily increase our weight. And whole grains is what we should have, and not white bread. A quarter of the plate would be healthy proteins, and we should be thinking more about having seafood and chicken. If you choose to have animal protein, then red meat, because red meat in terms of steak and bacon really not good for us.
Mm-hmm.
And
Lily, how similar is this plate to a Mediterranean diet?
I think it's quite easy to have the Mediterranean diet into be considered a healthy eating plate, because whole grains are very common in Mediterranean diet. They use olive oil, healthy oils, and fruits are usually and nuts in desserts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of fresh vegetables. So I really, and seafood is another healthy protein that the Mediterranean diet embraces. So it's quite easy to follow the Mediterranean diet with our healthy eating plate. We
Okay.
actually have over 30 versions of our healthy eating plate in different languages.
And I noticed you said, different colored fruits and vegetables, not potatoes. What do you have against potatoes? I just have to ask you because you really are the authority. You have millions of people going to the nutrition source for these facts. People are hungry to get the science-based facts.
Yes, potato, if you kind of analyze its nutrient content, is just like easily absorbed carbohydrates, which increases our blood sugar. So that's not good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's why we don't consider it as a vegetable. So
Mm-hmm.
one of our colleagues has been quoted worldwide by saying, okay, it's okay to have French fries, but only have about 6 or 7.
Okay.
So
Good
we
job.
eat mindfully. and and this is the plate in Greek. And I hope you can use it in any way that can help your family to eat better and to stay healthy. But we also have a kids healthy eating plate that is on our website. Now, let me turn to a recent study on red meat as I talk about the detriment of eating red meat and colon cancer, which has been observed for a while. But the more recent study have shown that if people eat just 2 servings of red meat per week, and this is not every day, it's per week, there is an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes when compared to people who eat fewer servings.
In these telomere studies, we really, with Dr. Cindy Leung and others, we really try to understand what in the diet pops out as being more related to these biological risk factors for aging, like short telomeres, like inflammation. And it's so interesting because it's really about the dietary pattern. And Mediterranean diet is related to better cell aging or longer telomeres. But there is, I would say, just a few findings on dietary factors that pop out that are related to short telomeres. And red meat, particularly processed meat, is one of those factors.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That is very important finding because it's getting at the DNA level. My goodness. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
it's very important observation. So this study on the Mediterranean diet is a very new study. It was just published last month, October 2023. And this is, I believe, is the first study that have shown that participants who adhere to the Mediterranean diet pattern, they experience fewer post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And for individuals who ate more red meat and processed meat, they actually have an increased risk of having more PTSD symptoms. And while the consumption of plant-based foods was negatively associated with PTSD symptoms. Now, this is one of the first observations, and the authors have already pointed out that this is really good insight for future studies to look at other mental health disorders and how dietary intake can improve different mental conditions. Very exciting research, but it needs further investigation. Now, another area of very active work and research is in microbiome. And as we know, microbiome is very, very important to our health. And there are many healthy foods that naturally contain prebiotics, and the highest amounts are found in raw versions of like garlic, onion, leeks, asparagus, Jerusalem, artichokes, dandelion greens, bananas, and seaweed. So in general, fruits, vegetables, beans, and whole grains are good sources of prebiotic fibers. Now, prebiotics are very important to our health, and microbiome works with it that way to have a state in our gut that helps us to maintain our health. Now, you can't imagine how many microbes are there in our gut. Researchers have found that there are 100 trillion, and that's a lot. And it's a living, dynamic environment where the relative abundance of species may fluctuate daily, weekly, and monthly, depending on the diet, your medications, exercise, and a whole host of other environmental exposures. And for the longest time, we've been told by our periodontists when we go and have our teeth clean, we should take antibiotics, and gosh, that kills our microbes. So the investigation of microbiome is still in its early stage, and there is a lot to learn from it. But the effect of microbiome on health is so immense and diverse. Not only does it affect how we would be affected by COVID-19 infection, allergies, autism, atherosclerosis, pancreatitis, autoimmune state, obesity, aging, and cancer. As you see, it's so important to be maintaining a healthy gut so that we would not be inflicted with all these problems. And we need probiotics and some prebiotics. And, you know, there's this whole industry of prebiotics. We're talking in the level of billions. And it's really something. There is so much out in the market. And the projection is that by the year 2024, the business of probiotics could be up to $65 billion. Wow. Now, do you need to take it? The research shown thus far is that probiotics could be effective for the young and the old because their microbes are not as robust compared to the adult. So whether or not you need to take a probiotic, you should be talking to your physician about that. But nevertheless, an important background and baseline is to have a lot of fruits and vegetables, whole grains and beans that can help us to have a healthy gut.
I'm so glad you brought up this huge connection between what we eat and our health through the microbiome, through the inflammatory process that affects all of these conditions and diseases. And I just want to emphasize the mental health link because it's so fascinating. There are so many pathways through which nutrition affects our mental health. So clearly the microbiome is one of them. And that's been well shown in animal studies, for example, that when we eat a very unhealthy diet, we change our biota, and there are certain microbiome associated with or causal to depression. Now, your point that eating a healthy diet with high fibers and these different ways of creating a healthy microbiome without needing all of the pharmaceutical solutions, which are almost never as good as the foods. This is also true for mental health. So in what we know about nutrition and psychological conditions like depression, anxiety, is that the American Western diet is associated with higher levels, higher symptoms of depression and anxiety in many countries, at least 10 different countries when they have these large surveys. We know that cross-sectionally, this processed food diet or fast food diet is associated with worse mental health. The Mediterranean diet is associated with lower symptoms. And we know that when it gets down to, in addition to the microbiome, the neurotransmitters that keep us healthy, like serotonin, they must have the nutrients, the vitamins that we only get from foods to create sufficient levels of certain neurotransmitters. And so what we eat is directly shaping healthy neurotransmitters for mental health. And so the Mediterranean diet is important. The high levels of fruits and vegetables with, all of those flavones, all of those chemicals, these can serve as precursors for healthy mental health. So I think part of what we all struggle with is just, we know that what is good for us, but we don't choose it. We choose foods that are in front of us. We choose foods that are less healthy. So Lillian, can you tell us how you started getting interested in mindful eating and what it means to you? What is mindful eating?
Mindful eating is a concept that was not taught in my graduate school at all. I discovered it when I attended the first retreat with Zen master, the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, in 1997. My goodness, the Buddha was a very, very smart philosopher. He already said we need to be eating mindfully, not only for our own health, but the health of our planet. And so it was just awakening to me in my whole thinking about food. And why is it especially important in the 21st century right now? It's because we are constantly on. We are multitasking. We are following a lot of messages from the digital gadgets. And we are not able to really focus on one thing at a time. So multitasking is the norm. And that's actually very draining for our brain. It's very hard for us to be recognizing how hungry we are, how full we are. And yet, at the same time, unfortunately, the food industry knows how to get us.
Mm-hmm. Right. We have limited attention. We will never change that. And if our attention is taken up with the multitasking, with the screens, it's almost impossible to be making wise food choices.
That's right. And Michael Moss, who is an investigative reporter of the New York Times, published 2 books that are really incredible revelation of what the food industry knows. My goodness. They knew that if individuals eat foods that are high in salt, fat, and also maybe crunchy, and also sometimes sweet enough with sugar, we cannot stop. We simply want to keep eating and getting back to the bag to have another chip until we eat the whole bag. And he actually published another book more recently called Hooked, and Dr. Daniel Lieberman, the professor of human evolutionary biology at Harvard University, made this very important comment. He said that hooked the book, blends investigative reporting, science, and foodie writing to argue that the processed food industry is no different from tobacco companies like Philip Morris that for decades lied about the harmful and addictive nature of cigarettes. Who is at fault? No one is forced to eat at McDonald's or drink Dr. Pepper. But Moss' argument is that free will is an illusion, at least for certain foods. And unfortunately, the gaming industry and the food industry and the drink industry knows this so well that they take advantage of children when they are multitasking, like they are playing a video game. They flash a lot of ads that they know will make them much more vulnerable in wanting these products. And it's really detrimental to children. And we are witnessing in America the increase in the obesity state in children. So, and also our media environment is really quite toxic, I think. There are lots of diets, popular diets that are written without the scientific evidence. People go on a diet and go off a diet, and the diet yo-yo got them thinking like, why should I be following any diets anymore? I just want to eat the way I like it. And then we still have all these other commercials popping up everywhere, enticing us to eat the unhealthy choices. And that's why mindfulness and mindful eating is so key.
It's this attention economy. Our attention is bought and we don't even realize it. And so I couldn't agree more. If we don't have ability to step back and be mindful in our choices, we really don't have free will in what we eat.
That's right. So we got to be able to coach our children, and having the whole family practice mindful eating so that our health can be maintained over time. So we actually, because of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching, and most of the research on mindful eating was conducted with binge eating disorder and dieting. My colleagues and I, Dr. Teresa Fung, and I wrote an article proposing to dietitians to think beyond personal behavior in aspects of what to eat, why do we eat what we eat, and how much and how, and to really think of the interbeing aspects of mindful eating. That, for example, the apple in my hand is the body of the cosmos. Without the rain, the sunshine, the fertile soil, the manpower that will harvest and transport the apple, we would not be able to eat what we have in our refrigerator every day. And so we would like to expand the model for healthy, mindful eating to include also planetary health and sustainability. And
people care, and when you show them these connections, it means more to them to choose sustainable food. You know, that we think that it's just the food in front of us and it's our personal choice. But when we actually realize both that the big food business is trying to profit off our decisions and that our choices can benefit the planet, this is so motivating to people. We need to let them know that as we educate people about what to buy, what to eat, what to order.
Over to you, Alyssa. I know you have a lot of exciting
I,
observations to share.
well, I've learned, I love your model of mindful eating. It really does help us use this idea of mindful nutrition and mindful eating for expanding our view. It's not just what we eat. We also influence what people around us eat. Eating is social. If you live with other people, you're eating, usually eating what they eat and what they choose. And so we can also think of it as a way to influence the health of our microcosm, our local environment, our people at work, at school, at home. So what I would like to go back to is just to mention some of the lessons we've learned from our clinical trials for mindful eating. And these have been for people who tend to be overweight or have obesity and to have tried all sorts of diets and to come in understanding that what they might try with mindful eating is a new way of having a relationship with food, not necessarily viewing it as a path to weight loss, because we know that BMI or our weight is incredibly hard to change in the long run, but actually our nutrition is something we can be really successful at. We can change the quality of what we eat, and that can change our internal health, our metabolic health. So the problem that I outlined at the beginning is that the emotional stress state, along with how it stimulates the reward system in our brain, our pathways for addiction, along with how it creates a lot of cortisol in our body, drives us to choose the carrot cake, not the carrot, drives us to choose processed food. We've learned that that can make us feel some relief just momentarily, though. But in those moments when we have a lot of stress in our body and we take in a lot of comfort food or processed food, which tends to have high sugar and high carbs, what we're doing is creating a perfect storm for storing fat in our visceral cells, our visceral fat cells. So our abdominal fat is different in its morphology. These are larger cells, and we call this stress fat because they are lined. There are so many receptors in them for cortisol. So when we're stressed, they're affected more than all the other fat cells in our body, and they fill up more, and they release free fatty acids when we're stressed like a flood. And so we have high glucose, high insulin, and high free fatty acids when we're stressed if we've built up this kind of stress fat pad. That was fine in our, more survival times when we had periods of famine or low nutrition. We wanted that stress fat, but now, of course, it's a problem of excess stress fat. So I had mentioned that not only does this create selection of undernutritious food, but it can also then choosing these, what these comfort foods can also lead to depressed mood. And this withdrawal from feeling good happens very quickly after eating. We have studied people. We've studied young women from 10 years old to 40 years old. And we know that feelings of stress when they're young predict adult insulin resistance. And that's through the abdominal fat mechanism. That high stress creates this high intake of comfort food and this pre-diabetes or pre-disease state of insulin resistance. So mindfulness is one way that we can help retrain and gain more control of what we put in our mouth. And again, this expanded view of choosing the whole foods that are more sustainable. So mindfulness training targets the stress insulin resistance pathway so that we can move away from this reactive state, this impulsive state of grabbing the donuts in front of us, which I will say we have very little free will over, particularly if we're in a stress state, to actually making whole food choices that calm our brain and create the healthy neurotransmitters for better mood. And that will indeed lead to less visceral fat. So we've done around 5 different trials, small and large, with mindful eating. And what we have taught people is tuning into their current present moment, labeling their feelings in their body, labeling their hunger so that they're aware of how on a 1 through 10 scale, how hungry they are, how full they are. So this is called interoceptive awareness. Increasing this awareness can help us not give in to cravings that are just really emotional cravings, but not real homeostatic need for nutrition. So we've used mindfulness to reduce cravings and help us overcome triggers to emotional eating, as well as to reduce and calm the stress response. And we have shown that it both reduces compulsive eating, but also improves our stress response so that when we are faced with stress, we recover more quickly. Part of mindful eating is really focusing on what are whole foods that I can choose? Where's the rainbow of fruits and vegetables? And it's so easy for us to get tricked into how the food industry presents the rainbow, which is very delicious looking, often colorful food that also stimulates our reward system. So really detecting the fake rainbows and looking for whole foods. This means shopping differently. So think about how it feels to shop in a grocery store in the processed foods section. There's no sensory experience. You can't see the food, you can't smell the food. You rely on those pictures and the words, like there's a sale, this is nutritious, things that aren't validated necessarily. And then there's the experience of shopping at a farmer's market. They don't sell boxes, really. You're buying whole foods or fresh seafood, etc. So in our studies of mindful eating, we have found that we may make a small difference in people's weight if they practice mindful eating, but even more so, people are able to improve their metabolism, reduce their glucose levels, reduce their insulin levels for the long run. And that is a more important goal than what the scale says. When we've applied this to women who are pregnant, who start pregnancy with tending to be overweight or with obesity, we do find that they're improving their response to the oral glucose tolerance test. So they are becoming more insulin sensitive with this training to tame their stress response and to make more mindful eating decisions, particularly right before they eat. We have also found it improves their mood, their stress and depression, even years later. So we're very excited about how important this is for women of childbearing age and women during pregnancy, and how it can influence their health as well as their child's health. We found that the babies who were growing while the moms were practicing mindful eating, mindful stress reduction, actually came out with more healthy stress response systems themselves and fewer doctor's visits. Even just making one change in your home or your work environment can not only improve your health, but have co-benefits to the environment. So in our university, we got rid of sugared beverages and encouraged people to use spa water and have less. Really, we're selling less cans and less bottles. And we were able to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of our university by 2% just by that one change of reducing the sales of soda. So let's end, Lillian, with having you remind us about this larger view of what does it mean that we're interbeings and that we're connected with planetary health.
Over in Plum Village, which is headquartered in France, in every retreat, they offer the 5 mindfulness trainings. And one of it, Claude said, aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I'm committed to cultivating good health, both physically and mentally, for myself, my family, and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. The wisdom of the Buddha from 2,600 years ago is so relevant to today. And that's why we need to be doing more research on mindful eating to see how we can improve the health of all in our world, as well as the planetary health.
Beautiful, so beautiful. We can overcome the compulsive consumption all around us by really sharing this view, by modeling this, and by teaching this to our children. We wanted to share with you just some links, some websites. You can learn more about the book Savor, which includes both the inner wisdom of mindfulness and mindful eating, the skills of being mindful about our body, feelings, emotions, but also of the outer facts of nutrition. So Dr. Chung is really offered for the first time both the inner and outer wisdom that we need together. So this has really been a life-changing book for many people. You can find the latest nutrition facts if you go to the Nutrition Source website. You will not be alone. There are 16 million visitors who rely on this for hard facts. Nutrition is such a complicated field. So this is a wonderful relief if you have questions, and also to see the latest science. And then lastly, I recently wrote a book on science-based tips for reducing stress in the moment. These are short practices that you could do each morning. There are 7 different principles that I lay out. And of course, mindfulness is woven throughout, because if we can start with a mindful check-in, we can really live our best life, live our intentions, live our values so much better than when we are mindfulness.
It's a wonderful, great book because the facts are very simple. And if you just pick up a few habits from there and practice every day, you feel much better. You see your mood improving and you are calmer, and you can even feel happier soon.
Thank you so much, Lillian. So our wish for all of you listening is that you really enjoy your next meal so mindfully, savoring it, eating slowly, and appreciating all of the farmers and workers along the way who brought you the amazing olive oil and other Mediterranean delights that you're experiencing. Thank you so much for joining us.